Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our 2025 Legislation Town Hall brought to you by the Maryland Recycling Network. I'm Peter Houstel, MRN's Executive Director, and we'll soon be joined by Kitty McIlroy and Chaz Miller, who will help us have a conversation about what happened and what may happen. Before we go there, let's take a minute and consider what's coming down the pike for MRN. So for those of you who have not signed up, we have a wonderful volunteer opportunity at Community Forklift next Tuesday, May 20th at 10 a.m. Hope some of you can join us. We're going to help them drive reuse in Maryland. And then on July 15th, we'll have a tour of the Eco City Farm where they do a fair amount of composting. And they're in Hyattsville, so it's sort of an urban farm, as it were, and very different kind of operation than what you might see in rural Maryland. And then, of course, on June 9th, we have that conference thing, the 2025 MRN Swan Mid-Atlantic Conference. You can see the program and the exhibitors and all that fun stuff on the website. Hope you will sign up and join us there. It should be a lot of fun. Good conference. Looking forward to it. And on the admin side of things, you can post your questions as we go in chat. We'll be opening the whole room up at a certain point, so everybody can weigh in on what they think as we get into the conversation further. And then we'll probably be posting a recording of the webinar or this town hall on our website, depending upon how things go. And that would be put up there probably the beginning of next week. Now, obviously, we want to have a big thank you to all our members because our members make this possible. It's their dues, their support that really keeps MRN in business. And for all the non-paying members out there, I hope you can help the cause and join MRN sooner rather than later. Go to our website, and we have a nice little place where you can sign up for as little as $25 a year. That's like, I don't know, some ridiculous amount per day. So without further ado, I want to turn the mic and the screen over to Chaz and Kitty. And so, Kitty, you're up first. Why don't you tell us about what you've seen in the 2025 Maryland General Assembly session?
Thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for attending. So yes, I'll kick us off. I'll talk about HB 83, the tire recycling fee. So technically that bill did not pass, but the concept of it was rolled into the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, or the BRFA for short. What this will do is increase the consumer fee charge from 80 cents to $1 per new tire purchased starting January 1st, 2026. And this fee, it will allow the fee to increase every 2 years based upon CPI adjustments. It will not exceed $2 per tire. So these funds, as they are currently collected and as they will be collected, are deposited into the State Used Tire Cleanup and Recycling Fund, which is administered by MDE. And I'll just note, unfortunately, for the Scrap Tire Fund, due to an amendment that was in the BRFA, up to $1 million of that revenue may be transferred out of the Scrap Tire Fund to the general fund of the state by June 30th, 2026. So yeah, they may lose a little bit of money in the short term. And then on a related note, I'll just say MRN is working with the bill sponsor of that bill and MDE, as well as other stakeholders as part of an informal tire work group. So we're looking at best practices for tire management seen elsewhere across the country and even in Canada and Europe. So it's been a pretty productive work group to date. And I will also say this is unrelated to the scrap tire program, but I'm going to mention it because it could get confusing if you haven't been following it. There was another amendment to the BRFA regarding a tire fee, and that included an additional $5 consumer fee per new tire purchased. But that money is deposited into the Transportation Trust Fund, and that funds, road projects, bridge projects, and other roadside trash cleanup. So if you see that new tire fee, that $5 is actually for a different fund and not for the scrap tire program. So and I'll quickly just close and say the reason why they did that is the state's seen a decline in fuel tax revenues due to improved gas mileage on newer and zero emission vehicles. So that's why this fee was introduced to help make up that difference and better fund those programs. So I'll turn it over to Chaz now.
Okay, HB 9, Food System Resiliency Council. It's kind of a good example of a relatively minor bill that's necessary to update and fix existing legislation. In this case, it essentially did two things. It defined what constitutes healthy food priority areas as predominantly lower income areas with limited access to retail outlets that sell good food. And it defined wasted food as not used for its intended purpose, but is involved, that's managed in a variety of different ways. Gave it a little more oomph to the bill. We did written testimony on that bill, and it passed pretty much without controversy. The water bottle filling stations was a fascinating bill to essentially require that in new construction or renovation of existing buildings that are required to have a drinking fountain, that the drinking fountain include the ability to fill a bottle of water. So you're not just drinking from the fountain, you can also just fill up a canteen or whatever you have there as the refillable container. That one went through fairly easily. That signing ceremony was also on Tuesday. And there was very little opposition to that one. And now, the more interesting bill, the big bill that passed, 901, EPR for packaging and paper products, passed essentially on the last day of the legislature. Some final amendments. It went to the Senate in, I think, mid-March, went to the House about 2 weeks later. This is that bill has been in the system since, I believe, 22, Delegate Lehrman's legislation, which had hearings, and that was pretty much it. It was changed, reintroduced. It was amended, though, in 23 to become a needs assessment bill. Do a needs assessment, and then we'll do the EPR law based on the needs assessment. Unfortunately, they didn't fund the needs assessment. That took another year. And as a result, this whole time to write the bill was really compressed. And it made for an interesting needs assessment and an interesting pressure on the legislature to get the legislation done. As we did on the water bottle filling stations, we testified in person at both the House and the Senate at the Senate hearing. It went very well. The sponsors were always very supportive of the amendments that we recommended. There are two amendments that I think are particularly important. One of which is a section that right now is unfortunately unique to Maryland, but I hope shows up in all the future packaging laws. It makes it clear, it's subtitle 25 of the legislation. It makes it clear that the PRO cannot, the Producer Responsibility Organization, which is the new group that will have responsibility for managing packaging EPR. It's a single group. Some people think it will now be the monopoly that controls recycling in the state of Maryland. One of the reasons we were able to get subtitle 25-2 is we want to make it very clear the local governments and private service operators still have a lot of control over what they do. They should remain the final say on how this law works out. But that the PRO cannot prohibit a local government or service provider from selling recycled materials or compost to end markets and retaining the revenues from those sales. In other words, it gives the MRF, it gives the composter more reasons to really do a good job in their processing and in selling that material. Secondly, affect the authority of a publicly or privately owned materials recycling facility or composting facility to determine which entities may use the facility. Peter, I need to take a really quick break. There's somebody at the door. I'll be back in 30 seconds.
So while Chaz takes a really quick break, and thank you, Chaz, I do think it's important to note here that one of the things that we've been able to do in the last couple of years is really develop some good relationships with key legislators. And I hold Chaz and Kitty responsible for that, because I think our conversations with Malcolm Augustine, the senator, and Dana Stein on the House side have all been very fruitful with respect to helping us get legislation across the finish line we thought was going to be good for the community. Chaz,
I apologize for that. There's something about EPR that creates glitches whenever I'm speaking. We had a meeting in Louisville in November, and one of the three panelists on the EPR panel, I was gone, stood up and left the meeting. Turns out she was having some kind of virus. This was just actually an energy efficiency check by Pepco. Anyway, to get back to EPR, affect the authority of a publicly or privately owned MRF or composting facility to determine which entities may use that facility. Now, the reality is in the state of Maryland, both Montgomery County and Prince George's County only allow residents to use that materials recovery facility. Baltimore County does have a contract with Harford County, but the counties look at this as a very important aspect of the operation of their facility. It's something that they have invested in. They have been managing it. It's for their county residents. And third, limit the ability of local governments, materials recycling facilities, or composting facilities to make decisions on recycling infrastructure purchases, including processing equipment. In other words, the local government, the MRF, is the final say in what processing equipment they will use in that facility. I think that enhances their ability to do the best job. There's also another one which came out of the Minnesota law, which allows the service provider to charge a fee for covered services to the extent reimbursement from the PRO does not cover all costs of services as specified. That was originally put into the Minnesota law because of the existence of subscription collection accounts residentially to guarantee that they would be their costs would be covered if the PRO cost was below their actual cost, because with subscription fees, it's door to door. It's very common in rural and ex-urban Maryland as a way of providing the recycling service. It's not that common in the counties along the I-95 corridor, although you can find it in most of those counties. That's a very unique spin on EPR throughout the world. The United States is the only place with subscription kinds of accounts. The Canadians, the Europeans who are working with the existing PRO on the laws in the 4 states already, they have no idea how to deal with this. So the Minnesota law was the first attempt to come up with a way to cover costs. Now, as I've been looking at that, that also means that a local government that uses taxes and is probably only going to get, well, under the Maryland law, it's only getting 50% on the dollar in the beginning. At the top, it's only going to get 90% of the dollar. It's going to keep those taxes anyway. But this means there's absolutely no legal reason why they can't use those taxes to cover that gap between 50% and 100% of costs. And the same applies to those with fees. Totally covered, I think, by that language. It's something that I don't think was anticipated when that was created for Minnesota, but it does cover a potential gap. The law is fairly straightforward. It's got a whole set of deadlines, and those due dates are particularly important in understanding how this is going to work out. And it's also an unfortunate glitch in the law. On July 21st of 2026, the PRO registers officially with the state. Now, Maryland's PRO is a group called the Circular Action Alliance. They are the producer group right now in Oregon and in Colorado. They were selected to be the producer group in Maryland for the needs assessment. They will transition into being the official PRO. Like, the basic thing they lose is they don't have a vote anymore on this Stewardship Advisory Council. A year later, on July 1st, 2027,
Can I have a Popeye smoothie, please?
I'm sorry?
Kristen, can you mute?
Go ahead, Chaz.
I'll send her a text.
Okay. On July 1st of 2027, MDE makes official its state-wide list of covered materials. Based on the experience in other states, that will be controversial. On July 1st of 2028, the PRO submits its plan for review and approval by MDE. That's July 1st of 2028. On that very same day, the PRO is supposed to begin reimbursement of at least 50% of the cost per ton. Now, because they don't have an approved plan, how can they do the reimbursement? Nobody knows. It's an unfortunate glitch in the law that got passed with changed language right at the end of the session. A lot of people, including yours truly, simply didn't catch it. And it's even more important because the service providers are not required to register, whether it's a local government registering to get its share, its collection costs covered, or whether it's a MRF registering to get its share of processing costs covered. They don't have to register until 6 months later, January 1st, of 2029. So a bit of a muck up there in the law, because the PRO's requirement is to come up with a plan for how recycling will operate in the state of Maryland for all the paper and all the packaging products that are covered by this law. And that's what they're starting to work on. They will appoint somebody who will be directly responsible for the state of Maryland. That person has not yet been hired. And that person will be the point person for the CAA for the state of Maryland. That person will be responsibility for putting together the plan. That person will be your contact with CAA for what you're going to be doing under that plan, whether you're with a county or whether you're with a processing facility. So a lot of stuff really to come together. The law gives you the basic outline of how this bill will work. A lot of stuff is left up to MDE to decide. The details. I think it's a much better bill than you see in the first 4 states. It's cleaner, it's crisper. It requires MDE, the state, and the producer to work out the details of key parts of this program. It did not accept the folly, for instance, of coming up with the recycled content goals. Legislators are wonderful people, so are advocates. None of us have the brains to do really good recycled content goals, as we're seeing in other states. The state, I think, is going to have the time to work with the PRO to come up with the right recycled content goals that will work in fact and not in theory. And we're going to see more and more of this as the theory of the law is turned into reality as the state works with CAA and as within various actors within the state, including the Maryland Recycling Network, SWANA, MACO, Legal Cities, private service providers, all work with the state to get this law working.
And Chaz, I think this is a great time to remind everybody that at the conference on June 9th, we'll have a panel of folks, including Chaz Miller and Bradley Baker from NDE, Eric Weiss from HDR, and somebody from CAA to really dig deeply into how the EPR legislation will be enacted and implemented over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So that gives you a good sense of where, they'll give you a really detailed sense of where you sit in that process. So why don't we take a look at what's going to happen in 2026? What's coming down the pike here? So let me switch to perhaps somebody wants to tackle post-consumer recycled content.
Yeah, what's going to happen in that the law, the EPR law, makes it specific that MDE will work with the PRO to set up those rates. That does not prevent somebody from submitting a recycled content bill saying this is what the rate should be. But I think in what's probably going to be a fairly busy legislative session next year, they're not going to want to deal with it. The immediate response of the 2 committees, and the committee in the House and the Senate, will be, we already have a lot on our plate. This is going to be worked out by the state in conjunction with the producer group. Let's move on to the next bill. So I don't think that's going to happen. Now, beverage container recycling refund. That has a different provision in the state law. Essentially, under the state law, the I'm trying to find my cheat sheet on that. I can't find it. Essentially, the law allows the creation by the legislature of a container deposit law. However, MDE is required, if that is to happen, to work to ensure it's harmonized with the efforts of the producer group, and that it's harmonized in terms of where the money goes and how. So I think in some ways that doesn't prevent by any means the passage of a beverage container deposit law next year. But I think the existence of the producer group, the existence of MDE's requirements, the existence of trying to translate this new law in reality is going to be kind of a compelling argument against passing legislation for deposits next year. Another very practical political problem is very simply this. Next year is an election year. Everybody knows the budget problems facing the state of Maryland. In fact, I've read a little article in the Post today that for the first time since 1973, the state's bond rating has been downgraded from AAA to, I think it's AA+. This is not a good sign. It's not a bad sign. A downgrading is never good. Okay. It could be much worse than what we could have been downgraded to. It's relatively minor in the scheme of things as a downgrade, but that's additional pressure on the legislature to do absolutely nothing that results in additional taxes or additional fees on the residents of Maryland. You add to that all the uncertainty over what's going to happen to the Maryland economy as the very stable genius in the White House plays with the economy and plays with the number of federal workers. There's a lot of uncertainty over what's affecting Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. So I think there's going to be real hesitation in the legislature to do anything that smacks in any way, shape, or form as a direct fee on either county governments or on consumers or as a new tax. Reusable beverage containers for stadiums died this year in the House Economic Matters Committee. I think that problem can be fixed next year. It was an offhanded comment. Well, it was actually a pretty negative comment about, will people get sick from bringing in their own reusable beverage containers? We didn't have a good opportunity to counter that the way those media hearings are held. And the sponsor was also the sponsor of the refillable water container bill in buildings. So my thought is that particular law is likely to go through next year. I don't know of any significant opposition to it. It just went into a committee that's very important. It did not happen to like it, and that was that.
Okay, here's some new flavors of EPR that might get across the finish line next year. Kitty, why don't you tell us about what's it look like for electronics, batteries, and mattresses?
Yeah, so we expect battery EPR, electronics EPR, including battery embedded devices, as well as mattress EPR to come back in 2026. MRN looks forward to supporting these bills again and working with stakeholders and the sponsors to get them across the finish line. Specifically, I'll note that, we were pretty excited to see that the mattress EPR bill made it out of the House. It crossed over to the Senate this year, so it's showing progress. However, it does look like the clock ran out before the Senate could really consider it. It had a hearing in the Senate Education, Energy, and Environment Committee on the last day of session. So that's not really enough time to move it through the entire Senate. And since there was no Senate sponsor, it wasn't heard earlier in session, unfortunately. So we're hoping that, those are some easy fixes that can be modified this coming year. Lastly, I'll note that MRN's presence on the Commission to Advance Lithium-Ion Battery Safety in Maryland has been helping inform considerations for the pending battery and electronics EPR bills for 2026. So this commission was created out of legislation that passed in 2024. So with that, MRN's looking forward to making recommendations as part of the final report, which is due to the Governor and General Assembly by December 1st, 2025. MRN, we've been concerned about electronics and batteries for a while now, and especially the fact that we've had some old battery and electronics laws on the books in Maryland. The battery, I believe, was originally passed in 1993, and the electronics was passed in 2003. So they definitely need some updates, and we're encouraged to see these bills being seriously considered by the legislature, especially with the increasing occurrence of battery fires becoming a major environmental, human health, and safety concern across the state, especially for our solid waste workers and facilities and vehicles that service solid waste. So yeah, that's all I have to say for those three.
And Kitty has just done incredibly outstanding work on all three of those issues, and attending the battery committee meetings, really marvelous work on Kitty's part. Thank you, Kitty.
Yes,
Thank you, Chaz.
Chaz as well. And so for everybody else, the reality is that this is what we think is going to come out, but it wouldn't surprise us to be surprised. So
No.
what we would like to do now is sort of give you guys a chance to sort of share with us what you think of what's happened so far, what you think is coming down the pike, what you would like to see coming down the pike. So now it's time for us to sort of open up the microphones, as it were, and give everybody a chance to weigh in here. So you don't have to, you can raise your hand or you can just start talking, whatever. If too many people talk at once, then we'll have talking heads. But let's go ahead and what
Peter, very quickly, there is one additional bill that's likely to be considered and go through both houses next year. It's Delegate Lehman's bill having to do with yard waste on state-owned properties.
Right.
It's made it to the House last year and this year, and it made it up to third reading in the Senate, and it ran out of time. So
Yeah.
I think that'll go through next year.
Yeah. Okay. So guys, don't be bashful. Turn your cameras on. Give us a big smile. Turn your mics on. Share your thought.
Feel free to grill us.
January of next year is a long way away.
Yeah.
Easy crowd.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the turnout. This is a very good group of people. I appreciate everybody getting on the call. And we will definitely be bird dogging the implementation of the EPR law.
Yeah. Allison, what do you think?
Is
Your mic's off. There we go.
Is it on?
Now yeah, got it now.
Okay, so is there any update regarding regulations that cover single-use devices, being that there's a lot more wearable devices, medical devices out in the public, and people don't know what to do with it, and they're just throwing it into the garbage, and yet you have a combination of a lot of plastics, a lot of sharps, and things like that. I was just curious, is there any kind of regulations that might provide guidance for that?
And lithium-ion batteries.
Yes.
Yeah. Kitty, what do you think?
Yeah, so I would say regarding anything that has a embedded battery or even removable battery, all of that we're considering within the commission that I had referenced, and also discussions that we've already had with the sponsors of the electronics bill that have been brought the past two sessions. So MRN's looking to allow any type of electronic that has like a battery in it to eventually be covered if it's not already upfront stated as like a covered device in the electronics legislation, because we know either way we want to get that material out of the waste stream and allow recyclers to properly disassemble the batteries that are in all types of, like you said, wearable devices, greeting cards. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So
Glass windows.
yeah, so
Nice.
that's what we're looking at doing. I don't think any state has actually expanded their covered devices list to cover that range of material, but that's what we're pushing for. So if it's not outright written into the bill, it would give the advisory council the ability to recommend devices to be incorporated, and then the way it had been written was MDE would have the ultimate authority to approve what the covered devices would be. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Thanks, Kitty. Carol.
Hello. So I would like to promote activism around the on-farm organics and wasted food reduction and diversion grant program. This bill has been introduced for a number of years. It passed the House this year and got stalled in the Senate. I think some of the controversy has been over the source of funding. Last year, the $2 per ton solid waste fee was removed. This year it was removed and replaced with a 5-year allocation from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. To be honest, my interest in this actually stemmed from a conversation with Shannon McDonald. So I'd be interested in hearing Shannon's comment on this. But several years ago, we were talking about the programs supporting the food scrap diversion mandates in other states. Massachusetts comes to mind. And they provide financial assistance, they provide technical assistance to composting, to food waste reduction, education, etc. And she said, we just really don't have the finances. Massachusetts actually substantially funds their program through a energy investment fund similar to the SEEP, I guess is the acronym. So anyway, I think it's a really valuable initiative, and I think there will be continuing conversations on how to deal with issues that arise. This year, MACO supported it. MRN has remained neutral. Sorry, MACO did not support it. MACO was neutral, yeah.
Chaz, I recall when we discussed that there was a fee associated with it, and I know that was from a budgetary perspective, a concern of the legislators. But what else did we talked about with respect to that?
We were
neutral.
We were neutral.
Yeah.
I think the reality remains the fee, and
well, they took off the fee.
I know,
right?
But the reality remains how you're going to fund it.
Yeah. Somebody's got to pay somewhere. So.
And that's what they're grappling with.
Yeah.
I mean, to be, as an economist, it's a green fee, right? It has two purposes. Not only does it very minor charge relative to tipping fees, not only does it, support this fund, but it also provides incentives to reduce, disposal. To the extent that it's minor, but the incentives are perhaps minor, but it is raising the incentives for reduction as well. So next year, I think the fee is probably not the way to go. But the SEEP may be the strategy again next year.
Yeah, I'll just add, I appreciate that comment, Carol. And we watched that bill. I think we didn't take a position just because, again, like the concerns around the fee. I think we recognize that it can work. But I think, with the stance that MACO had and just local governments are concerned about, those minimal charges add up, unfortunately. And for public sector, especially certain jurisdictions, there's concerns around where they would fund it. Private sector, it's always like they'll just pass the fee on, but ultimately it's going to hit local governments. So again, we really, I would say, I personally, I support the concept, but yeah, looking forward to seeing how it could be amended, maybe to gain more support next year. So thank you.
Tara, how about you?
Hello. I wanted to delve a little bit more into bottle bills. We supported the bottle bill in litter reduction, especially from a litter reduction perspective. There's a lot of support in Baltimore from especially one city council member that really wants a bottle bill, maybe at the local level. If there's any examples that exist out there from maybe firsthand or anecdotally that people can share about passing a bottle or litter reduction at like a municipal level. It'd be interesting to hear more about that. So I wanted to throw that out there, but also hoping to see something like that come back and see a little bit more support for that.
Chaz, anything you would add from the discussion around the EPR bill and the carve out for?
No, I think it's just, it's going to be what issues the House and Senate want to take up next year. There's a lot of very strong arguments in favor of a deposit, but it is going to be coming up at a time when they're going to be very touchy about any new tax or any new fee.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I'll second. Yeah, I think we acknowledge that deposits tend to work. They tend to increase return, but again, it comes down to the balance of making sure our MRFs don't go under in local recycling programs, so don't fall apart. So I think over this interim, you know, if we see conversations around the bottle bill occurring, I think we'll try and be engaged with it and offer our guidance. Chaz especially, he's our MRF expert. So Kara, I don't know how to really answer your question, but
I'd love to
is
see
really what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'd love to see more information on how a bottle bill would impact a MRF. I mean, for us, it would be very litter focused. So especially in the downtown area, removing things that would get washed into the waterways, get things off the streets, and the opportunity for reimbursement seems like a fair incentive. I mean, most of what we send to a MRF is coming from curbside collection from residences. And so this seems like a stream that may not necessarily be ending up from our perspective. And so it would be helpful to see a little bit more about what streams we would expect to be disrupted to going to a MRF, and if like private versus publicly owned MRFs have different opinions about that as well.
Well, I know, as Chaz has said numerous times, the states that have bottle bills put those bottle bills in place before they had really a formal
with one exception.
With one exception.
The deposit laws all predate the wide array of modern curbside recycling. It's aluminum cans, it's PET bottles, and it simply just gets into the revenue flow of a material recovery facility.
So, Kara, I think it's a good question, though. To what extent can we accurately assess the degree to which aluminum cans and PET bottles would stop landing in recycle bins and stop landing on the streets, and go and give the MRF in essence the feedstock they need to pay the bills, because if they can't pay the bills with those materials, then they're going to charge higher fees to all the municipalities and jurisdictions that use them, and then so we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And if you're robbing Paul to pay Peter, I'd be fine with that, but the other way around, I'm not crazy about. So, Stefan, you've been sitting there very patiently. What's up?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm calling from DC, and I just wonder, with the packaging law in Maryland, will that affect how out-of-state recyclables going to a Maryland MRF are treated? Or because we send a lot of our stuff to Maryland MRFs, so I'm just wondering, is there any effect on our stuff in the future?
So where are you located?
DC.
No, actually Maryland sends material out of state to MRFs. A lot of the material in the Eastern Shore, for rather logical reasons, goes to the Delaware facility. And there's material from at least 2 Maryland counties to go to Pennsylvania. It's one of the unique little realities of Maryland. So I don't think that would be an issue at all. I think any MRF is going to welcome more materials. DC is very close to, you're very close to one private facility in Prince George's County, and in terms of transportation, you're very close to at least one other privately owned facility. So I don't see that changing at all.
Okay, thanks.
I don't see any other hands raised. Any other questions we have out there? Allison, yeah.
Is a right to repair law even being considered in Maryland?
Could you start that again, please? I think you were.
Is a right to repair law
Right. Oh, okay.
even being considered in Maryland at this time? I was just curious.
I can speak. I could speak to this a little bit, Chaz, unless you want to start.
No,
Okay.
go for it.
Well, so actually there's been some right to repair bills brought on regarding like ag equipment specifically. Could be for other types of equipment. I don't think any of them have passed yet. For, mainly for the agricultural sector to allow them to like repair their tractors or what, whatever the farm equipment is that they have. I'll say, we've had some discussions with legislators on right to repair. There is definitely interest. I think our first goal is to get the lowest hanging fruit accomplished, which is to get simply just funding in place for existing end of life electronics that are coming through, because right now public sector isn't funded. I mean, private drop-offs aren't funded either. So a lot of that material is just going into our disposal stream, even if it's separately brought to like a drop-off, publicly run drop-off. So I think lowest hanging fruit is to get battery recycling funding in place and electronics recycling funding in place. Once those programs are in place, I think that right to repair discussion would then come in. I can't say, MRN doesn't have an official position on it. I would say I'm personally very interested in it. I've looked at what's been going on in California a little bit. I haven't followed it super recently, but I feel like it always gets kind of brought up in the electronics discussion. And it's, it's important. You have to be careful though, if you're giving the general public the ability to take out embedded batteries that can cause fires, and those batteries when they can leak toxic fumes if they're not handled correctly. So you want to be careful about how you're doing that. And possibly within a right to repair bill, you would just have like certified actual renovators who would be the approved recyclers, who would have the ability to go in into those devices and repair them and then give them back to like the public that bring them in. So I don't know if we'll see one in Maryland, but I'll just say there have been conversations around all that.
Are there any other materials that people see that need to be addressed, or either picked up or collected or processed differently perhaps than we are doing today? Anything out there that people have been wondering, why isn't that covered, or why isn't that addressed? Why isn't that taken care of?
So you are bringing up a stage for my last question is with the expansion of food trucks. Is the food waste and the material waste and the fuel covered under existing regulations, or is this like somebody who has been able to go under the laws and they're not written into any of the existing regulations? I was just curious.
Interesting.
I don't know the answer to that. I wish I could give you better an answer, but I don't know the answer.
I asked because I see an explosion of food trucks everywhere. And I just suddenly realized these places have a lot of food waste that they're carrying with them, but what do they do at the end of the day when they go to unload and reload for the next day? Because a lot of them are residential based, not necessarily a commercial based food truck. So how are they handling that unless they're putting it into their own residential waste? That's why I was curious.
Yeah,
I believe MDE just shared the answer. Question 14 on page 14 of the link.
Shannon, you want to take a minute and just quickly tell everybody what they'd be reading?
Sure. So first, it has to meet the 1 ton a week requirement, and it would require them to be within 30 miles of a facility willing and capable of accepting their materials in order for them to be determined whether or not that is a person under the law. But we describe that information there. The likelihood of a food truck generating 1 ton of food residuals a week in a dedicated location might be a lot. However, if they're using a commercial kitchen or a commissary kitchen, that itself could generate that much material. And as always, if you have questions about facilities, you can send me an email. I'm happy to go and visit those facilities and see how they're doing.
But it's a great question, Allison. And I'm going to suggest to everybody here, when you go to the food truck, see if they have a little compost bin there and say, hey, why don't you have a compost bin? Because they certainly could easily squeeze something in there. I have no idea what their typical leftovers look like, but it certainly seems like a reasonable expectation. Joseph, you had your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I had a few questions about tires and tire waste, and just was wondering what was the best way to get into contact to. I know there's a tire working group. Is there a particular person or a general contact for that group if we want to reach out for some questions?
She's right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on anybody's mind?
I was kind of thinking about the food truck thing a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess this wouldn't fall under the requirement for recycling at public events or festivals. I guess that's just for recycling, not food scraps. Is that correct, Shannon?
We do address it in the guidance document.
Okay. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
No, it's totally fine. We do address it in the guidance document. Again, it's a ton a week. That week is not an average. That week is meant as if it's any one point in time throughout an entire year. In the case of many of the festivals that have food trucks, the combined pre-production is usually desegmented. So again, sometimes when you think about an actual ton of waste in a generation, it doesn't really happen. Now, also, when you go to festivals and you pay $9 for a sip of water, you probably are not going to waste that sip of water. So we're seeing that there's a lot of decrease in materials as well. It doesn't mean that there isn't all decrease, but a lot of times there's a lot of ketchup in a tub as opposed to all of those French fries that people had paid money for.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you, Shannon. Okay. Sounds like we're getting close to last call. Anything else anybody wants to share? Speak now or forever. Well, actually, don't hold it. Come to the conference because we'll all be there. Be happy to answer any questions you may have. Because that's what we do.
Can I jump in with a quick question?
So speaking of questions,
yeah, Kelly, just speak up a little bit if you can. You're kind of hard to hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kelly Dordan with Trash Free Maryland. This was a great, fantastic legislative recap. I really enjoyed it. I'm wondering if anybody has heard recently or plans for next year for a skip the stuff, like legislation requiring restaurants to only hand out packets of disposable forks and knives and stuff on demand. Thank you.
I could briefly speak to this just about what I don't know if you remember this, Kelly, but it was brought up in Maryland a few years ago during COVID. It wasn't the right time to bring that bill just because of the sensitivities around service, the service industry and how they were really struggling during COVID. So I thought it was a great bill. I think it's just there wasn't support for it at the time because mandating additional requirements on a struggling industry it just was bad timing. I've actually been looking to see if that was going to be reintroduced and it hasn't been. And I'll say on a personal note, I would love to work with interested stakeholders and request maybe that to be brought in for consideration in the future. We have our hands kind of full right now working on a lot of the other advocacy around EPR, but yeah, so I would say I can connect with you offline and share the sponsor name with you. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and I think actually with the passage of the packaging bill this year, the legislature in a lot of ways might have more bandwidth for that particular legislation next year.
And Kelly, on a related front, and speaking of shameless promotion, at the conference, we also have a session on scaling up reuse. And I think that's a place that relates to this conversation a lot, because it really says, how are we maximizing the resources we have that we're using in our systems, particularly in food services, where we're seeing a lot of the reuse experiments being conducted. So we have some folks from Closed Loop and from Dispatch at the conference talking about their programs. And I think people have been able to do some pretty amazing things. I don't know how many saw Crystal Dreisbach from, at that point, Don't Waste Durham, who's now president of Upstream, talking about the programs they put in place. So I think there's an awareness here and a hunger for, and finally, perhaps some economic viability for sustainable reuse systems. So come to the conference and hear all about it. So that being the case, I would like to again thank Kitty and Chaz. Big round of applause for Kitty and Chaz. Yay.
Thanks, everyone.
Remind everybody that on May 20th, that's next Tuesday, we're going to all be down at Community Forklift doing some volunteer work for them to help them reuse a lot of materials. And then on June 9th, we have the conference at Turf Valley. And on July 15th, that's also a Tuesday, we'll be at the Eco City Farm for a tour there. And again, if you're not a member, please fix that as soon as possible. It can be fixed on our website for a very low cost, and you don't have to have health insurance to get that repaired. So with that, I want to say thank you very much to Kitty and Chaz, and thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate the conversation. Look forward to seeing everybody in about 3.5 weeks. Take care.